Welcome and thank you for joining us. I am Candace Hamlin and I am in the Loke Gallery with artist Irina Ojovan. Irina Ojovan was born in the Republic of Moldova and studied painting in both Germany and Italy. She currently resides between Munich and Dusseldorf and is represented by the Loke Gallery in Berlin, where she has a solo exhibition titled Inherited Profiles. The exhibition is accompanied by a wonderful publication of the same title. Irina, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would like to begin the discussion by asking you if you could discuss inherited profiles. Perhaps you can say a little bit about the exhibition, the kinds of works in the show, as well as the meaning behind its title.
The series I developed for the show at Look, that is called Inherited Profiles. I took some aluminum shapes my father developed for building up moldings while he was an architect. Since I was a child, I've been seeing him working in his studio, or sometimes he was bringing me in the apartments or in the houses he was working. So this was kind of my first contact to what architecture means. He was also surrounded by his friends that were painters or sculptors that were helping sometimes to develop his projects, so to make everything complete from the architecture and also to design the interior. I always remembered him working, and I wanted always to take this part that are physical, some objects that he left for me, and then to develop and combine with my own drawings or my own sketches or my own ideas, of course, that are part of my practice. First of all, I made a series of sculptures. They are aluminum. Then it came the stainless steel sculptures.
Okay.
And then there was the sculptures, I call them like the wall sculptures, that is oil on wood panels, and the paintings that are separated in two categories, oil on paper and oil on canvas.
And the title comes from the fact that you inherited these aluminum profiles from your father.
Yeah. I inherited his also architectural projects and this aluminum profiles.
And so these inherited profiles are really the starting points for all the works in the shows.
Especially for the sculptures. So for the sculptures, I really tried to retouch or rechange his drawings very little. So, but sometimes they are just a line, and then a line becomes like a three-dimensional. So I would give it deepness, no? So I will look from above a line, and then I decide how high it is. So how much of the information here will come and become kind of real. A line that becomes a sculpture, becomes three-dimensional.
And for the paintings, because I find your process to be really fascinating, and it would be nice if we could walk the audience through the idea of taking these inherited profiles as a starting point and then outlining them, tracing them, putting them on paper, so to speak, the outlines, and then cutting those and then using those for collages and then developing your own work. So perhaps you could, in addition, so you've spoken about the sculptures, but maybe say a little bit about the works on paper and the works on canvas and then your wooden sculptures.
Yeah, actually, I mean the metal, so the stainless steel and the wooden sculptures, they are very close to the original, let's say, inherited profiles I had. But for me, the profiles is also when I think about human, how you, like an actual profile of a person, but also the profile of his character, or profile of a memory of him, or about his biographical background. So in the paintings, then I go out of the sketches that I inherited from my father, and I open up kind of building up new profiles. So as I mentioned, sometimes I do cutouts of paper and then I combine them and I build kind of a new form that is also for me as a new character. Or
absolutely. You're building and you're layering on something.
And this, I think, comes out also from my process of like really painting. When I'm painting, I'm building also the color. So there are several layers that they will be combined and go towards like a more complex color. So I would never use a pure color. When I think about the resulting color, I always think about in the deepness of it. So how many layers or which colors I will let them cross each other. So they will build maybe two of them in the line. When they will touch, they will give birth to the third color, so to say. Sometimes these shapes that we see in the painting, so these kind of cutouts or profiles, they are also the result of more shapes I draw before, cut it, and then I put them together.
And you said to me in a previous conversation that you're using the inherited profiles as a starting point, but you also draw on childhood memories and everyday experiences. These memories, these recollections are brought together, so to speak, with the physical objects, and then are incorporated in the paintings. I wonder if you could say something, because it interests me why you've created these metal frames, and you say actually they're not frames, they're part of the work.
Yes.
So can you maybe explain that a little further?
The first decision for the paper paintings on paper, let's say, is the white frame that sometimes is not white. I also sometimes used the for example, the silver leaf, or sometimes I use also the color. But first is like the decision is how much of the white, because the white paper, it's already an information for me. So that's kind of being in front of a white canvas or a white paper is the most tragic moment, I would say, because then you think how I can ruin it or how I can make it better. No, kind of. So for me also, it's already a color, a structure, there is information there, and then I decide how much I would like to leave out of it. So then I kind of tape and make the borders, let's say, for starting the surface where I would put the color.
Yes.
And then depending of how much of that white, it's also important because I know what will come next to it. It's everything kind of like really building, how I would think about an architect planning and building a house or something. So it's all like layers that they have to be not ruled, but one after another, then to reach a result. So it's also like for me this, and the frame, the aluminum frame, for me they are very close to the sculpture. So to have still also this the same material that I brought, because the aluminum sculptures and the aluminum frames, but to make them complete. So then there is a little space also between the paper and it, so it makes this shadow. So it's kind of like a small contrast, and then it ends over there. And it gives it also a bit of deepness, so it's not that flat. So it also brings it closer to the wooden sculptures, I would say.
Yeah, so one of my questions when I was thinking about the arrangement of the works in this space, actually it's a two-part question, because I'm wondering if you could say something about the relationship between the works themselves, so between the paintings that are in this back room and the paintings and the sculptures, but also the works in relation to the space and the architecture, because I know that is a huge component, particularly of the sculptures. So when I look at them, I see them as works that don't necessarily function on their own as objects, but they interact with the space itself, and in particular with the negative space, because we see these profiles, so to speak, from a bird's eye view. So is there a relationship, for example, between the paintings themselves, or the paintings and the wooden structures, the sculptures, and the stainless steel sculptures?
Yeah, there is a connection. The starting point is an idea that I have, and then is the decision in which material or what would it become, like a floor sculpture, a wall sculpture, or painting. So the starting point is always that idea or what interests me in that moment, and then it's the choice. So they are always connected, because sometimes while doing a wall sculpture, for example, it opens up an idea for a painting on paper, and then what I didn't reach, or it was still open doors from a painting on paper, but I see, like working on canvas, there is a different structure already from the canvas. So the paint also lays on differently, and then I understand that this is the next step. So I always work on them at the same time.
Okay.
And when I imagine or think about a solo presentation, it's easy to put them together because they are one thing.
So they're all
one
connected,
look.
and you were thinking about the space and the show when you were making the
Yeah.
works, and thinking also about their arrangement. How was it for you to no longer work alone? And what I mean by that is that with the works on paper and on canvas, obviously you're working alone.
Yeah.
But with something like the stainless steel sculptures, you had to go somewhere and get help for the cutting process. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was back in 2016, around like that. I started doing sculptures, and one reason was because I had to kind of allowed myself to become a sculptor first of all, because I had ideas and made sketches even before, but I couldn't make that step because officially I always was a painter and I was studying painting. So I thought, I'm not allowed to do sculpture. I would be like disrespectful toward those ones who spend years and years of learning that. And the second point was I knew I would need the help of somebody else, because a lot of machines I'm not even allowed to use. The first objects or sculptures, they were smaller size, and I could work also in the academy. I was still studying in Munich, so I was using the workshops over there, and everything I could do myself or they could teach me to do it. I was like really insisting, I really wanted to have the hands, but not because I wanted to control it, but because I wanted to learn it. And also I do changes while working. Also in the painting, of course I start a painting knowing a direction or having an idea, but it changes in the process. So I was scared while doing sculptures. You have to make a decision, is that one, and you cannot do any changes. So the first step was like working with the professionists, but also doing the most I could, like the sanding part of marble, or even cutting some pieces of marble. The wooden, I do it myself.
You cut yourself, yes.
And it was also an important decision for me. I mean, of course, there is a laser cut that could do them perfectly, but this is not my interest. First of all, I mean, I'm not interested into the perfection. And I have a very old like cutting machine. It's not even sometimes doing 90 degree, but it's sometimes when it's overheated, it goes like that. But I can feel it. So the machine does not control me, I control it. So I guide it how it will cut. So some of the parts, they are not really perfectly 90 degree, or sometimes I'm sanding it. With the metal sculptures, of course, a metal Werkstatt doing them, but that I would go visit them and like see
and oversee the process. I wonder if that's also because you watched your father as a child drawing on these aluminum sheets and then cutting out the profiles himself. So perhaps you've been influenced by his architectural practice. So I want to talk about the sculptures and the paintings, and the fact that it seems like your practice oscillates between the two, or rather it moves across media. So you're not simply a painter, and you're not simply someone working with sculpture. And I noticed that in some of your paintings, and you mentioned the year 2016, they had this sculptural element to them where they were coming into the space of the viewer, so to speak. Where did that interest come from, and how did you make that transition to not only being a painter but also working with these materials and creating sculptures?
It's not that I'm working like, I don't know, 5 days a week. I mean, I'm working all the time, like thinking. So then I noticed like more often and often I had ideas that I couldn't translate them into paintings. That was not enough for me. So they were always reminding us sketches, and I knew they have to be made out of other material, even if, I mean, these are also hanged on the wall, and they're also 2 centimeters deep as a painting is on canvas. But it is a sculpture, because at least how I thought about it, even if it's painted again with oil on wood, it allows at least me to call them sculpture, because it was my intention of making it. And in the painting also, at the same time, it's a new element kind of came into it. Some of the colors, they go over the edges. So some of the colors really embrace, you say? Like
absolutely.
embrace the format. And it came
quite naturally.
Yeah. Because I mean, as a person, I'm also somebody that in a lot of moments try to control a lot of things. But I love discovering always and allowing myself to open up to, let's say, mistakes or things that happen just like spontaneously, and then I spend even more time of watching it or like discovering and questioning myself why that happened. Do I need it? What I learn about it? Sometimes in small painting, mistake is coming out, and then I might change everything I've done, let's say, perfectly or that was planned before, because I feel I should give it importance or give it attention.
You raised two things, time and planning. So let's start with time, because when I look at your sculptures, I realize that the works, they form a bridge between the past and the present. And why I say that is that the starting point, as we've talked about, are the profiles, or is the profiles, excuse me. But they engage with the space, and they also engage with the present, because they rely on reflection, they rely on the people in the space to view them. And so I just want to push you a little bit on this concept of time and how important is it in your practice. Because I recently found out that you keep a diary for your paintings, and I didn't know this. So recording when you add a layer of paint, and obviously you have to wait hours to days for the paint to dry. So maybe you could speak about time and your practice.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I don't have a limit of time when I'm working, because I'm continuously working, like bringing it home. Also, when I take a day off, let's say, is never a day off, because I would think, even if I'm not physically in the studio. Then the calendar. So
yes, this is very interesting.
Because already I have to think about a lot of things, or take a lot of decisions, or questioning myself why I do this and why I do that. Even when I take already a decision and it seems that is that, I question again why I mean, there is always this why, and investigating. So I'm kind of full in my mind with this. And then it comes like the practice, the painting practice. That is, let's say, the technique part. And there, at the beginning, I was always just remembering. So if I start working on a painting today, I can go back to it in maybe 5 days. Okay. Because the layer of color should dry, and I should be sure it's dried safe, for that I can touch the work again. Because as I mentioned, I built the forms and the colors by layering, so going back to what I did and building also the color. So as an example, I put an orange, but with the intention I would like to reach a proper green. So I knew for that green, it needs, once the light will go through the color, if there will be that touch of orange, it will make that green like different. Or like alive. So because of this, I have my calendar, so I write down, okay, I've been in the studio, I painted on this work, and then I don't have to remember, because it takes sometimes like, I don't know, half a year or even longer to finish one work. So I would never be able, or I would be really too much full of information, remembering which day was what I was doing. So it makes it just easily. But then I also have developed kind of a technique. Once I think the work is done, I also choose that day when I decided that this is done, and write it down. This is, and I write finito. I mean, I speak Italian as well, and I don't know why I choose for that, like kind of a statement, the Italian word finito, that is like done. But a lot of times this done is not done. So then I have another papers, do small sketches and say, okay, I started in this day and I finished that day. And sometimes some other days are coming.
And what will you do with this calendar? It's basically an archive of your process.
I have it in my archive.
Are you thinking of maybe doing something with this body of information?
don't know. I didn't thought about it. I mean, it would be too much to think at the moment. I'm like thinking about the new sculpture series. So I mean, but I know it's just something that is new in my life, let's say, and I felt it's something good. So that's why I kept it. I don't throw it away.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to keep it as part of your archive. Thinking about planning, I want to push you also on this a little bit because we had spoken about the works on paper. And I was surprised to learn that you have an idea of the final colors. Not so much the forms, like you're working with these collages, and so then I started thinking, in general, do you have an idea of the end product, of where you're going with individual works, but also your practice? Because I think you're very decisive. I read an interview and you stated that at 3 or 4 you entered a studio and you knew in that moment that you wanted to be an artist.
Yeah,
and
I
you
never
just decided.
questioned that. I mean, I never questioned that maybe I was born to do something else. No, I mean, I knew it.
You're very decisive, and also like when we were speaking about the works previously, you said to me, no, I have a clear understanding of the colors I want to achieve when I begin a work, and I know it will end that way. And so I just thought conceptually and also as a practice, it's very interesting that you think that way. It's the opposite of how I think when I'm writing, for example. I always try to, like based on advice from my advisors, to be very open-minded and to never have a conclusion, because you never know where the research is going to take you. But with you, you have a clear understanding of the colors you want to create.
But just about the colors. As you mentioned, I mean, since I was free, let's say, of course it was unconscious and so on, but I always used color. And I was attached. I mean, I really, it was very important focus for me. Also because I was questioning, like, yeah, there is a, let's say, limited or unlimited, maybe depends on which perspective we look, of colors that we all can use, but how I can help them a little bit. Maybe once I will reach that a person that will see those works, just because looking at those colors, they will recognize straight away that they are mine colors.
Yes.
Because I had this experience, I've been in Frankfurt, and then I saw an installation, so wall painting, and from like first seconds I understood this Güntherwerk. And I mean, it's a violet and it's green, but it's his colors. And then I really stayed amazed from that second. I mean, I analyzed myself and my reaction. So I said, that's great what he achieved to live in our, or like in our, how we perceive these colors.
Yes.
Or at least how I perceive. I said, I didn't say it's it might be a work of Günther. I said it's Günther's colors. So it's too long time that I'm like working on colors. So that's why when I start to work, this is the only thing I'm sure of, and everything the rest is like, that's part.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Even when it's finito. Even when it's finito.
Yeah.
You return
even if
to
when
it.
it's finito, it's not really enjoying.
Maybe it's a personal question, but I'm just wondering if you have any other influences besides your father, or individuals or events that influence your practice.
I never had that feeling of I would collect catalogs or books of several artists that I will look like once a week, or some artists might look before starting the day or the working day or something like this. But I mean, of course I have artists that I admire or I'm thinking, or most often I remember Morandi's works. And I'm like amazed about all the palette that for me is really wild, even if a lot of people are saying, yeah, it's always this grays, I don't know, like it's always this kind of brownish, beige grays. But I think that is amazing how much time and part of his life he was just investigating one thing. So this I appreciate more, like really to go deeper. Or like you have an element and then you try to take out like the essence of it, because that is actually in my practice the most difficult part, because I could easily put out all the information I have or it comes into my mind, but it's not my what I'm looking for. So the most difficult part is how much I take out. So what stays, what in that moment I decide it's important to be there, or it's important that I will concentrate on it, or why I choose just that part of the information I had in that day, for example, thinking about a work. Why did I choose just this? So,
and with the monochrome works versus the works on paper, do you think there's a difference in terms of the amount of information that's being provided?
yeah, because I was in, like, some of them are also glossy colors and some are matte. And then I work with the brush in a different way, so I make a structure, emphasizing already deciding the shape of the sculpture, also the framing, because the color goes a little bit like on the sides and it's different than the color on the front. And then deciding if it's matte or if it's glossy, because a matte surface would not allow the light to go in, and it's kind of more like puts the viewer in front of something that is a little bit more closed, and then the glossy ones that have reflection also it's kind of more welcoming. For me, were already too much of the information, or like, so that's why I decided for a monochrome, because it was just like something had to be clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, something had to be like, okay, that is clear, and then you have to take time to investigate the small details, the small secrets or small craziness I left like kind of on the sides or in the...
Left for us to investigate, to see for ourselves. Do you want to say something about the works that you're currently working on or future projects?
When was it? I arrived yesterday, and the day before, like Wednesday, I was working on a paper work, and I had done some of the wall sculptures and some metal pieces, but this is since like longer than half a year they are there and uncompleted, because there was something it was missing. And on Wednesday I found out how they will like come together, and then they will complete each other.
Wonderful. And what about your plans for the rest of the year? I mean, plans in quotation, we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I really learned in 2020, because we planned our show to be in 2020, and now it's happening this year. At the beginning it was hard for me, because I mean, of course, it was like in a bubble, what is going on, what is tomorrow. I just like let it go, because I mean, I'm not an artist that works just when has a project. So it's not that, okay, I know in half a year I have a solo show, I should work. No, I'm working, doesn't matter. I remember I had during my studies a year that all my colleagues were doing some projects and I had nothing. So I had a moment, an evening, I still remember, I was surrounded by some friends and I really shouted, I want an exhibition, because I was already so ready. And my colleagues were asking me, why you're coming every day? Do you have a project? And I was like, no. They were questioning why I was coming every day in the studio working if I don't have a project. So I'm working, and I'm sure till the end of the year it will come a lot of projects.
Great. Well, I think on that note, we can probably conclude. I want to thank you again for being here this evening. It was wonderful to hear about your practice in further detail. And just a reminder to the audience about this wonderful publication, Inherited Profiles. And again, the exhibition is open until tomorrow, May 22nd. Thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you.